All right, welcome into the Logan Ward Show, episode 3. Hopefully have a good one. At least you think it's a good one in store for you today. College football, NFL topics coming up here in just a couple of moments. But before then, be sure to subscribe. Make sure that if you are listening on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you want to, you can hit the notification bell. It's going to give you a notification anytime we upload a video, go live. You can kind of make your notifications there. If you're not listening on YouTube and you are on Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, also subscribe there. All right. I want to get into this first. And again, recording this on a Tuesday night. So if something happens when you're listening to this on Wednesday during the day, if something has broke, please bear with me. Obviously, trying to record this at night, get some things done. But I think what quite possibly be the biggest hire in college football history could potentially be happening if Bill Belichick, and this is true. If this is true, might be the biggest hire in college football history. This is Ollie Connolly, who is a writer for The Guardian. Now, I've never heard of it, but seems to be reputable. He was previously an NFL and a college football scout. He writes for The Guardian. He has 32,000 X followers, if that's what you want to call them, Twitter followers. And this is what he said today, earlier this morning, Tuesday morning, very early. Update. Bill Belichick has agreed to become the next University of North Carolina coach. Belichick handed the school a 400-page organizational Bible with structure, payment plans, staff choices, etc., decisions on whether to commit with USC. He is expected to know their decision, as in North Carolina's decision, within 24 hours. When Nick Saban went back to college football, it was obviously a big deal. But when you have what many consider the greatest NFL coach in NFL history, to after an offseason where he didn't get a lot of looks, there wasn't, there were some talks that he might have been in communication with the Atlanta Falcons, but they went with Raheem Morris. There was not a lot of juice for Bill Belichick in the NFL ranks. And so I thought he was going to sit out this year and at some point was going to make a run at another NFL job. And I even said a couple of weeks ago when he had talked to North Carolina, I didn't buy it. I don't think that a guy who is so close to being the all-time winningest coach in NFL history and has 6 Super Bowl rings, I didn't think that he was going to want to deal with what college football is right now. And I guess I was wrong. If this is true and Belichick is going to take North Carolina, I don't know what he's exactly doing. Now, maybe this is because he's dating that 24-year-old and he feels rejuvenated and he's ready to go back and see what he can do at the college ranks. But I can't imagine Belichick going to an 18-year-old's house and trying to recruit him and dealing with 17 and 18-year-olds who want $200,000 to commit to North Carolina. Now, I do think that with him being at North Carolina, if this is true and this comes to fruition, that there are some advantages. I do think that recruiting is going to be a little bit easier. Belichick went on the Pat McAfee show and basically laid everything out and said, I'm going to treat this like a professional organization, a professional team, and this is basically UNC is going to be a pipeline to the pros. This is how, if you want to be an NFL player, this is where you need to go. And I think that could work. I really do. I think that there are a lot of people, a lot of 5-star people that when you go to Georgia and you play for Kirby Smart, you're like, yeah, we might win a lot of games in college, but Kirby hasn't had an NFL career. He doesn't know what it's like in the NFL, things like that. This is Bill Belichick. One of the top 3, if not the greatest NFL coach of all time. He knows how to win. He knows how to get things done at the NFL level. He knows how to prepare you for the NFL. So I do think that could be a big recruiting tool in your toolbox. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around Belichick wanting to recruit students and wanting to recruit kids. And the college game has so much pressure and no downtime that, Lane Kiffin said this in a press conference talking about we have National Signing Day in the middle of bowl season and playoff implication games. Like that, the system and the schedule of college football right now is awful. You just had National Signing Day this last Wednesday. Tuesday, the transfer portal opened and like 1,000 players hit the transfer portal in the FBS and Division I. It's hard. In the middle of all this, there are some late games where you're trying to win, trying to get into a conference championship game or fighting for a playoff spot, now getting prepared for a bowl game, and you got to deal with transfer portals and National Signing Day. So it is hard for me to imagine Bill Belichick signing up for this. But if this guy's right, if Ollie Connolly's right, then it looks like Bill Belichick's going to be the next coach at North Carolina. And that's a program that hasn't had a ton of success. They're not a blue blood, obviously, in terms of football. Would be replacing Mac Brown, who I think it did a decent job with North Carolina in both stints that he was there. But you're going to have to compete with basketball, obviously, at that university. But Bill Belichick is a big enough name that you might be able to compete. I just don't know how Belichick's going to react to coaching 19-year-olds. I don't know if his shtick works at that level. At the professional level, I think it's really easy to say whoever's the best player wins, and that's what's going to happen. I think it's harder at the college level, especially if you've given NIL money to players. And the third string guy who you're not paying very well or paying anything, doesn't have any NIL deals, starts making money. And now you have to talk to donors to try to keep him happy. I think that I truly believe that Belichick, if this is true and if this comes to fruition and if this is not just some type of ploy to see if he can bargain with NFL teams, then I think you might have a tough time. Now, if you look across the NFL and you try to see, all right, what job openings are going to be available. We know that the Saints are available, or the Saints are going to be available. You have the Jets that are going to be available. The Jaguars might have an opening. I don't think the Raiders are going to have an opening, and I don't think they're firing him. The Giants might have one if they decide to move off Brian Daboll. The Bears have an opening. There's not a lot of great jobs right now in the NFL. If you want to go to Chicago, maybe you like Caleb Williams, but if you don't like the diva and Caleb Williams, if you're trying to stay away from that, then I don't know what to tell you about the college level, Coach. I feel like it's going to be rough for you. But anyway, if this is true and this is what's going to happen, I am extremely interested in this. And it also, this is interesting too, because he had said there was one thing that I'd read that was talking about Belichick's actually asking UNC that his son, Steve Belichick, basically be the head coach in waiting. And Stephen Belichick will be named. This is what they said 4 days ago. This is Ollie Connolly, the same guy. 4 days ago, said, per sources, I'm told Bill Belichick's negotiations with North Carolina include a guarantee that Stephen Belichick will be named the school's head coach in waiting. And UNC is open to that guarantee. Okay, so maybe that's the play. Maybe you're trying to get a job, try to set a foundation so that you can hand it off to your son to get a kind of a leg up at college football. Maybe that's the thing. Stephen Belichick, obviously, he is coaching at Washington with the Huskies this season. Maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe that is the play. But nevertheless, if that is the case, and you have a 70-plus-year-old Bill Belichick going to the college game, things are going to get interesting. All right, I want to pivot to the actual college games. All right, I want to pivot to, we now know the brackets. We know the college football playoff bracket. It is out. College football, these games start next week. Not this upcoming Saturday. You have Army-Navy games, but next week. And so I want to talk about this for a second. I think that a lot of people have already talked about how this bracket did no favors to Oregon. And I know that it is in year one of this bracket. I understand that there are going to be some changes to the bracket, probably maybe not next year, but soon. They're going to tweak this a little bit. At some point, they're going to tweak it. But the way that this played out is the number one overall seed, Oregon, who is the only undefeated team in college football, gets the 1 seed. And what do they get? They get the potential second round matchup of either Ohio State or Tennessee. Both those teams extremely tough. Then in the semifinal, you get Texas, and then you play for a national championship. Whereas on the other side of the bracket, Penn State, who just lost to Oregon in the Big Ten championship, plays a home game in round 1 against SMU, and then we'll get Boise State at a neutral field. And if you know anything about college football, obviously anything can happen. It's any given Saturday. But Penn State's roster, it's a lot better than Boise State. If you look at recruiting over the last 25, 30 years, 40, there's never been a recruiting class in Boise State history that's been as good as a Penn State roster recruiting class. And Ashton Jeanty has been incredible. I would give him my Heisman vote if I had one. But if you're Penn State, who lost the Big Ten championship game, you have to play a round 1 game, and I guess that's your punishment. See, this is what things are going to have to change, and they're going to have to tweak this. But it makes no sense that Oregon, the number 1 overall seed, Big Ten champs, in the second round draw Tennessee or Ohio State, and then has to play potentially a Texas team in the semifinal. Oregon has looked like the best team. I'll kind of go through this here quickly, kind of give you my thoughts on who's going to win these games and why. Again, like I said last week on the episode, this has been the best college football year that I can remember. Multiple teams still being in it. At this point, obviously, you have your 12 teams, but Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss still sitting there at the last couple of weeks of the season with an opportunity to get into the playoff. And that's what it's all about. ACC championship game this weekend. this past weekend where you had the conference championship games, every game mattered. Every game mattered because the winner of the game was guaranteed a spot in the playoff. Now, we had 11 teams that were pretty much guaranteed, and we were just waiting on that 12th seed to kind of figure it out. But there could have been some chaos if SMU beats Clemson or UNLV would have beaten Boise State. There would have been some chaos there. And so this has been an incredible college football season, and we're gearing up for the first ever 12-team playoff. So let me break down kind of my predictions on the college football playoff. So let's start with Tennessee versus Ohio State. The Volunteers travel to Columbus to play the Buckeyes. I'm going to take Ohio State. And I think that losing to Michigan, having a couple weeks rest, giving an opportunity to let that anger of losing to Michigan the way that you did kind of fester there, I think that's going to provide big for Ohio State. I think Tennessee has a really good defensive front. Their run game is really good. They're able to run the ball really efficiently. I think that Nico Iamaleava is very sporadic at times. There are times that I saw him against Oklahoma this year where it looks like he couldn't read a field. And then I see him later in the year in the second half against Vanderbilt, and he's dicing them up and knows exactly what to do with the ball. And I know that some of that is just the defense and Vanderbilt maybe not providing the resistance that Oklahoma did in that game. But Nico's been very up and down a lot of the time throughout this year. So not that Ohio State has been any better, but I think at home, at Columbus, Ohio State gets it done. Clemson at Texas. This is interesting. So if you're not from Texas, this is going to be a pretty cool matchup between Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik. They've played in a state championship. I think it was 2019, 2020, maybe 21. I forget the date exactly, but it was Cade Klubnik's Austin Westlake versus Quinn Ewers, Southlake Carroll. Big duel in Texas at Jerry's World for a state title in Texas, which is obviously a big deal, especially here in the state. And Austin Westlake, which is where Cade Klubnik is really literally right down the road from the University of Texas. So this is a coming home party for Cade Klubnik. That's why you saw the reaction that he had when they said that they were going to be traveling to Texas to take on the Longhorns. This is this is going to mean a lot. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of family there. I think that Texas is going to get it done. Now, watching that game against Georgia, something is wrong with this Texas offense. They had like 250 yards plus in the first half against Georgia, but only had 6 points. Couldn't convert. Quinn has been bad at certain points in the game. Even a couple of weeks ago against Texas A&M, had 2 really bad turnovers in terrible spots in the red zone. So Quinn Ewers has not played well. And I don't know if at some point they, pull the trigger and go with Arch Manning to see if they can change things up. I know that SMU's quarterback was able to get out of the pocket against Clemson in the ACC championship game, and that kind of gave them fit. So it'll be interesting to see if Sark decides to maybe give some Arch Manning looks and give him some packages and give him more opportunities as they go on through the playoff, because this is a really talented team. It has one of the best offensive lines, the most veteran offensive line in college football. This offensive line has played with each other for a lot of games. And when you're in this scenario and you're in this situation, if your quarterback's holding you back, what do you do? Would you rather lose with Quinn Ewers and maybe the floor is a little bit higher, or would you rather roll the dice and see what happens with Arch Manning, whose ceiling is going to be higher than a Quinn Ewers? I do think Texas wins. I think their roster is better. I think that Sark is an incredible coach, and having even a week off, this is Army-Navy week, having a week off and being able to regroup, playing it at home, I think the Longhorns win that game. On the other side of the bracket, Indiana at Notre Dame. I think this game might be a little bit closer than what we are anticipating. I said last week that I would not let Notre Dame get into the playoff until they get in a conference. I do not care that you lose only one game and you go 11-1. If in this age of college football, you are not in a conference, you do not deserve to be into the playoff. Get in a conference, Notre Dame. You can't cherry pick your schedule and then get into the playoff. They did it this year. Obviously, they have that one loss, which is a terrible loss. They able to beat A&M on the road, which at one point looked like a really good win, but the way that the Aggies kind of fell off the last couple of weeks and ended their season, I don't know if that win was as impressive as we might have thought it was at the beginning of the year. I think Notre Dame wins this game. I do think they have a good recruiting class. I do think that they're a well-coached team. I think that Riley Leonard is a good quarterback. I don't think it's fair that there are teams like a South Carolina, who probably should be in, has 3 losses, but didn't get to cherry pick and hand pick who they played this season. The SEC schedule is the SEC schedule. You played it. You changed your non-conference the way that you want it to go. But South Carolina beat the ACC champs. They had a really good record this season, and only 3 losses. Notre Dame, you can't cherry pick. Get into a conference. Get into the Big Ten. Quit this nonsense. Nevertheless, they win against Indiana. SMU and Penn State. I think SMU kind of threw their haymaker at Clemson. I think this Penn State team is going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage, and I think Penn State wins pretty easily. Sam Houston going up to Pennsylvania in December. It's going to be cold. Obviously, we're all from Texas. It doesn't get that cold like that in Dallas, SMU. It's not happening. I think Penn State kind of rolls with that one. All right, second round. Second round of the playoffs, Ohio State, Oregon, round 2. I'm taking Oregon. I'm taking Oregon because I think that Dan Lanning's going to outcoach Ryan Day. I don't know if Dan Lanning is an incredible schematic coach. He's more of the CEO type coach. But if you have not watched the University of Oregon's Us Versus Them or Ducks Versus Them little mini series that they have after every game, they do kind of a documentary style video after every game. Dan Lanning might be the best motivator in all of sports. Anytime they have a camera on him and he is working his players, trying to get them motivated, finding ways to get his players to flip a switch, I think he's an incredible coach. And I think they win the rematch. It was a close game in that first game against the Buckeyes. The second game, I think, is going to be a little bit more one-sided. I think Oregon wins that one by at least 10 points. All right, Texas, Arizona State. Give me Texas. Arizona State, been a good story. They've had a good run here. Scatterboo, that dude could not be taken down in the Big 12 championship game. No one could take him down. So I think that he is a decent running back, but I think that Texas has too many dudes. They've been here before. This is Arizona State's first college football playoff game. I think that maybe be a little bit too big for them. It's one thing to play the Big 12 championship game against Iowa State. It's a different thing to be playing in the Peach Bowl versus Texas. Different atmosphere, different vibe. I'm rolling with the Longhorns in that one. Georgia, Notre Dame. If I'm going to take Notre Dame, I think that for whatever reason, Georgia has had Texas's number, been able to get after Quinn Ewers. I think that this last game in the SEC championship game was a not necessarily it was a win for Texas. I think, or for Georgia. I think Texas lost the game more than Georgia won it. And so I've seen them go to 8 overtimes with Georgia Tech. I saw them get blown out by an Alabama team only to be able to come back and then fall short. I've seen this team not play well this season. And I think that even if it's Carson Beck or their backup quarterback, I think Notre Dame's playing well enough football. I think they get past this one. I'm going with the Irish over Georgia in that game. Penn State and Boise State. Give me Penn State. I think Boise State's a great story. Genty, an incredible player. I'm hoping he wins the Heisman Trophy. Penn State has too many dudes. This is another roster mismatch. I think the Penn State has the horses to beat the Broncos. All right. Semifinal. Oregon versus Texas and Notre Dame, Penn State, your final four. I am going to pick Texas to win this game. And I'll tell you, one of the only reasons is because I don't think that the Ducks are going to be able to run the table, finish the season 16-0, Big Ten champions, and deal with the travel that they've had to deal with. I said it last week in the podcast. It is remarkable what Dan Lanning has done with that team and their ability to win games when you are flying from Eugene to Wisconsin, Eugene to Ohio State or whatever. You know, they have flown all over the country this season. And the back and forth, I think, at some point catches up with them. I think that this Texas team has the roster to compete with them. The quarterback situation is concerning, I think, with Texas. But in terms of O-line play, I think these are two of the best O-lines. These are the two best defensive lines. I think their weapons are comparable. Texas have had a little bit of issues with running quarterbacks. You saw that when the backup quarterback for Georgia came in that SEC championship game. He was kind of able to give them a little bit of fits. But I think that Texas has enough, and I think that Sark is a good enough coach, knows how to win, that they get it done, and Texas heads to the national championship. All right, let's go Penn State and Notre Dame. I know that James Franklin has a reputation where he can't win the big games. He wasn't able to beat Ohio State in a top 10 matchup this season. I don't know much about Marcus Freeman. Like I said, they don't play anybody. They beat A&M on the road this season, but the quarterback that A&M was starting that year is in the transfer portal now. He didn't start halfway through the season. They went with a different quarterback, and now Connor Wegman's in the transfer portal. I don't know who Notre Dame has played that has the roster that matches up with them. I think that if Notre Dame can somehow get past Georgia, I think there's a chance that they could get to a national title. I think Riley Leonard is a good player. I think the run game for Penn State's looked pretty good. Them hanging around Oregon for that long and being in that game, there was a back and forth, a lot of offense in that Big Ten championship game. I think it says a lot. This is a coin toss. I truly believe that this is a coin toss game. I'm going to go with Fighting Irish. So in the national championship game, and I know that I just said I don't even think that Notre Dame necessarily deserves to be in the college football playoff because they handpicked their teams. I just think that they have I think that getting Indiana at home and then going to a banged up Georgia team and playing them on a neutral site, I think that's a pretty good matchup. So yes, I do have Notre Dame in the national championship. So Texas, Notre Dame. Who do I have in the national championship winning? I'm going to go with Texas. I think that Texas has been a really good team all year. I think their quarterback is going to be the issue. But I think more than any of these other teams where we haven't seen and I think it's DJ Moore, or Dante Moore, who's the backup quarterback for Oregon. We haven't seen backup quarterbacks for these other teams play. I think that Texas has two quarterbacks that are capable of winning big time games. And Quinn Ewers, who won last year, won the Big 12. Was right there against Washington. Was really a fourth down play in the end zone, away from possibly getting to a national title game last year. A lot of these players came back, but I think that now that you have another quarterback in Arch Manning that can possibly get you to that point as well, if you need to. We've seen him in big games. We saw him with a rushing touchdown against A&M. He can play. And so I think that their advantage, Texas's advantage, is that they have two quarterbacks that could potentially win you a national championship where we don't know anything. Now, I know they've lost 2 games, both at the hands of Georgia. So I get it. I definitely get it that if you've lost to the same team twice, that can maybe get in the way. But I think Texas has what it takes to win the national championship this year. All right, that was a lot of college football and Bill Belichick today. Went about 35 minutes. That's all we're going to do for today. We'll talk. We're getting right into the end of the NFL season. The Bills have clinched the division. The Chiefs have clinched the division, which is just at this point inevitable. Just kind of pencil that in as long as Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are quarterback. Just kind of pencil that in as division champions. You got the Eagles, I think, knocking on the door of clinching the division. So NFL season, playoffs about to start. You have the college football playoffs about to start. It's a good time. It is a good time for sports. Got the NBA coming up. We'll be talking NBA here in the next couple of weeks as we kind of get into that season as well. Remember, be sure to subscribe. Don't forget that. Hit the subscribe button wherever you are. If you're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and we'll catch you next week. Peace.